The sky above Kansas stretched out like a sheet of quiet steel, unaware that within its silence, something extraordinary was about to awaken. It began not with fanfare, not with alarms, but with a single step the moment she stepped into the cockpit. Sarah Bennett, quiet, composed, almost invisible, took her place in the narrow doorway. Colonel Briggs glanced at her with a smirk that held more than doubt, it held dismissal. "You flying this beast? We're not that desperate," he muttered, half amused, half irritated, shaking his head as if her presence was some minor inconvenience. Sarah said nothing, not a word. She just adjusted the straps across her chest, checked the controls with a precision that spoke louder than pride, and sat down. 32 minutes later, every single person aboard that aircraft would owe their life to the very woman they had looked past like empty space. But let's go back. Let's go back 10 years to a woman who once danced with thunder. Sarah Bennett could fly anything the United States Air Force had ever built. The F-16 Fighting Falcon, the massive C-5 Galaxy, and the near-mythical F-22 Raptor machines that required steel nerves and perfect instincts. She flew them not like a pilot, but like a poet whose verse was etched in contrails. She didn't need to dominate the aircraft, she became part of it. Her hands didn't control, they translated. Those who flew beside her said she could feel the soul of a machine. She was selected for the Thunderbirds, the elite among the elite, not because she asked for the spotlight, but because the sky itself made room for her. But brilliance has always made some men uncomfortable. A mechanical failure, no fault of hers, during a routine training exercise ended her career in the blink of a boardroom. The investigation cleared her. No pilot error. They praised her skill, her calm under pressure, her saving of lives. But whispers started. Quiet looks in the officer's lounge. Sudden silence when she entered a room. Her career didn't end in a crash, it ended in erosion. Slowly, invisibly. Not because she failed, but because some men couldn't stand that she hadn't. The military clipped her wings without saying the words. Who didn't know her past? A gardener whose sunflowers reached higher than most could believe. A flight instructor at a regional airfield who never spoke of her Thunderbird's patch or the distinguished flying cross that sat locked in a drawer. Sarah Bennett, the legend, had become Sarah Bennett, the local. Until today. She wasn't supposed to be on that flight. A favor from an old military friend. A hop to Missouri to visit her brother. A cargo flight. Routine. Unremarkable. Just a woman with a book and a thermos of tea, trying to keep her memories folded away in silence. But fate doesn't knock when it's time. It kicks the door in. At 32,000 feet, with the engines humming steady and the hum of conversation light in the cargo bay, Captain David Morrison reached for the autopilot and collapsed. No warning. No sound. His hand hit the yoke as his body slumped forward, sending the aircraft into a jolt. Lieutenant Jake Williams, the young co-pilot barely 24, still learning the weight of responsibility, yanked Morrison back and grabbed the controls. His voice cracked as he called for help. "Mayday! Mayday, Cessna Tower. This is Hercules. 724 pilot is unconscious, possible heart attack. We need immediate." And then, silence. Not from fear, but from systems failing. Warning lights bloomed on the panel like red flowers of doom. The hydraulic pressure dropped, the controls became heavy, unresponsive. The aircraft rolled slowly to the left, like a giant falling asleep mid-flight. Colonel Fitzgerald, on board to inspect supplies headed for flood victims, heard the panic and rushed into the cockpit. What he saw stole the color from his face. His mission was slipping out of the sky. Williams was sweating, his hands shaking, fighting a monster made of steel and failing systems. Hydraulics at 70% and falling. Williams gasped. "I can't hold her steady." The aircraft groaned under the strain. 40 minutes to the nearest runway, but without hydraulics. That might as well have been the moon. And then she appeared, quietly, as if summoned not by chance but by destiny. Sarah stepped through the cockpit door and saw everything in one glance. The warning lights, the unconscious pilot, the failing hydraulics, the fear. "Get out of here," Fitzgerald barked. "We don't need civilians getting in the way." But Sarah wasn't listening to his voice, she was listening to the plane. She read the instruments, absorbed the data, and turned to the terrified co-pilot. "Have you attempted to engage manual reversion?" she asked, calm as still water. Williams blinked. You know about manual reversion on a C-130? Manual reversion, a desperate last resort system that bypassed hydraulics. Few had used it. Fewer had lived to talk about it. It required the kind of strength, coordination, and nerve that only combat pilots ever earned. Fitzgerald wasn't having it. "Security! Get this woman out of my cockpit!" And then the number 2 engine exploded. A fireball ripped out of the cowling, painting the left wing in flame. The aircraft shuddered like a struck animal. Rodriguez, the flight engineer, shouted, "Engine fire, engine 2! Panic became real. This wasn't a drill. Williams froze. Too much, too fast, beyond training. "I can't do this," he whispered. Sarah stepped forward, firm. "Lieutenant, I need you to stand up and let me take your seat. Now." Something in her voice bypassed logic. It commanded trust, but Fitzgerald grabbed her arm. "I will not let a civilian touch these controls." Sarah met his eyes with something colder than ice. "In 90 seconds, this plane will spiral and everyone will die. You can argue with me, or you can let me save your people. Choose." She didn't wait. She slid into the seat like a woman reclaiming her throne. Sarah Bennett's hands moved across the panels like they never forgot what greatness felt like. Her voice, steady and firm, sliced through the chaos. "Rodriguez, fuel shutoff for engine 2. Now, hit the fire suppression system the moment fuel flow stops. No hesitation. No second guesses. Just clear, surgical precision." Rodriguez obeyed instantly, something in her tone unlocking the muscle memory of following command, not rank, but competence. The fire suppression activated with a soft thud, and the fire on the left wing began to die down. Sarah adjusted the throttles, compensating for the loss of thrust, her left hand gripping the yoke like it was part of her. Slowly, against all odds, the aircraft began leveling out, clawing its way back from the edge of catastrophe. She reached for the lever. Manual reversion. It groaned in protest as if the aircraft itself were waking from a long sleep. Most pilots avoided that lever like a ghost story. The thing of simulator nightmares and forgotten manuals. It meant flying blind, flying heavy. The controls turned to stone under her hands. It would take 2 people to do what she now did alone. But Sarah didn't flinch. Her arms tensed, her back straightened, and she held steady. This wasn't muscle, it was will. From the co-pilot seat, Williams watched, stunned. Manual reversion. "I've only read about it, how do you?" "Cessna Tower. This is Hercules 724. Sarah cut in, speaking into the radio like she was ordering coffee, not navigating death. "Declaring emergency. 1 engine out due to fire. Complete hydraulic failure. Pilot incapacitated. 52 souls on board. Request straight-in approach to runway 27. 3 hours of fuel remaining. Emergency equipment required on arrival." The reply came fast. "Hercules, 724, Cessna Tower. You are cleared for straight. In approach runway 27. Winds calm. Altimeter 29 or 5. Emergency vehicles are rolling." "No vectors needed, Tower," Sarah replied. "We have the field in sight." And still, she didn't breathe. She turned to Williams, not with judgment but with calm, shared strength. "I'm going to need your help. When I say right rudder, push with me. Left, same thing. It's going to feel like wrestling a bear underwater. You ready?" Williams nodded. "Yes, ma'am." His voice no longer cracked. Not from fear, at least from awe. The next 20 minutes felt like eternity wrapped in steel and fire. Sarah flew the wounded aircraft like a sculptor reviving a broken statue. Every muscle in her body strained against the resistance. Every small adjustment felt like lifting a mountain. But she didn't falter. She talked Williams through it, each call out exact. Her voice a thread that kept him tethered to clarity. She wasn't just flying, she was teaching him, even now, passing on what the world once tried to bury. 10 miles out. Rodriguez's voice broke through the cockpit like a whisper of reverence. "We're on glide path." Fitzgerald stood behind them, silent. His earlier anger had evaporated, replaced by something quieter, almost sacred. He'd flown with the best, watched war heroes and legends take the sky. But he'd never seen this. Not like this. Not with a plane this broken and a storm this close. It humbled him, and it shamed him. "Ma'am," he finally asked, his voice a rasp, "are you, a pilot?" Sarah didn't look up. She made a minor correction, then gave a nod to Rodriguez. "Check the landing gear. I need 3 green." "Gear extending, locked," came the reply. 3 green lights. 5 miles, Williams reported. 1,500 feet. Airspeed 140 knots. "Who are you?" Fitzgerald couldn't hold it anymore. And this time Sarah looked up just for a second, her eyes meeting his with a calm sadness. "Major Sarah Bennett," she said quietly. "Former demonstration pilot. United States Air Force Thunderbirds." The name hit the air like a crack of thunder. The Thunderbirds. Legends in flight suits. Pilots chosen from thousands, trained to fly tighter than instinct, inches apart at near supersonic speed. They didn't just fly aircraft, they flew poetry, precision that bordered on divine, and she had been one of them. Fitzgerald's mouth went dry. All the doubt, the insults, the dismissal now stood naked before him. He had thrown out a goddess of flight for daring to wear yoga pants. 2 miles, Williams called. 500 feet. On glide path. On speed. Sarah nodded, calm even now. When we touch down, I'll need help with the brakes. Auntie, skid's gone with the hydraulics. Don't lock them. The runway appeared gray salvation stretching beneath them. Sarah adjusted their descent with microscopic movements. The aircraft listened now. It had found its pilot again. 50 feet, 30, 10. The wheels touched with the gentleness of a prayer. Not a bounce, not a jolt, just arrival. Sarah held the nose gear up, bleeding off speed, then gently brought it down. Williams followed her brake cues. Light pressure. Back off. Ease on again. The C-130 slowed. Slower, slower still, and stopped well before the end of the runway. Silence. No one spoke. The cockpit was still except for the fading whine of engines. Then applause. From the cargo bay. A wave of it. 50 lives, suddenly very aware that they still had heartbeats, that they'd seen something they'd tell their grandchildren about. Sarah shut down the engines like tucking in a child. Calm, careful, professional. She took off her headset and wiped her brow, then turned to check on Morrison. He's breathing. Probable myocardial infarction. Will need immediate medical attention. As she stood, her legs trembled slightly. Not from fear, from the effort of carrying a 100,000-pound beast back to Earth on nothing but will. Fitzgerald stood in her path, eyes filled with something raw. Major Bennett, he began, voice cracking. I owe you an apology. She stopped him with a raised hand. You don't owe me anything, Colonel, she said, her voice soft but firm. You did what you thought was right. That's what leaders do. Then she picked up her canvas flight bag, slung it over her shoulder, faded letters catching Fitzgerald's eye. USAF Fighter Weapons School. The Air Force's version of Top Gun. The next words caught in his throat. How did someone like you ever stop flying? Sarah looked at him then, and behind her eyes was a story even longer than today. Sometimes, she said quietly, the system isn't ready for people who shine too bright. She paused at the doorway, but the sky never forgets. She turned to Williams. You did good, Lieutenant. You held your ground. Trusted someone when it mattered most. That takes guts. He stood straighter. Would it be all right if I contacted you? For training? Her smile was the first soft thing in hours. Tuesdays and Thursdays, Rocky Mountain Regional. First lessons free for any military pilot who wants to actually learn. And then she walked out. She walked through the cargo bay like a ghost returning from war, but this ghost was flesh and bone, and every pair of eyes followed her with reverence. Passengers stood not out of panic now, but out of pure, unfiltered respect. Some reached for her arm, others whispered quiet, thank yous. Sarah nodded back gently, never breaking stride, never basking. True heroes don't pause to collect applause, they walk through it like smoke. At the bottom of the air stairs, emergency vehicles swarmed the tarmac, lights flashing but sirens muted, as if the machinery itself understood that noise had no place here. Sarah paused and looked up, not at the crowd, not at the flashing reds and blues, but at the sky. It was still the same sky she once danced through, that soft Kansas blue, wide open and endless. She closed her eyes for a brief second, letting the wind graze her skin like an old friend, and somewhere in that silence, the fighter pilot in her exhaled. For 20 minutes, she had returned to who she really was, not the yoga teacher, not the woman with sunflower seeds in her apron, but Major Sarah Bennett, warrior of the sky. Back in the cockpit, Fitzgerald remained at the window, unmoving, his thoughts drowning in the weight of what he had just witnessed. Beside him, Sergeant Rodriguez stood silently, eyes fixed on the tarmac below. He broke the silence first, voice low, barely above a whisper. Colonel, I've been flying for 15 years. I've logged thousands of hours in the air, but I've never seen anything like what she just did. Manual reversion on a C-130 with one engine out? Most of us couldn't pull that off in a simulator with a checklist in hand. She did it, with 50 lives at stake, and she made it look easy. Fitzgerald said nothing. He was still trying to understand how someone they nearly threw out of the cockpit ended up being the only reason they were all still breathing. He looked down again, his eyes finding Sarah's retreating figure. She wasn't rushing, wasn't strutting. She simply walked like someone who had nothing to prove anymore, and maybe she never did. Sir, Williams finally said, stepping forward to the window, who exactly are the Thunderbirds? I mean, I know they're some kind of demonstration team, but... Fitzgerald turned, and the words didn't come easily. They're not just a demonstration team, Lieutenant. They're the tip of the spear, the best of the best. Pilots are selected from thousands. They fly closer together than you can believing to wing, at hundreds of miles an hour. They execute precision maneuvers that most people can't even comprehend. One mistake, and they're all gone. The training is brutal, the standards unforgiving. Only the elite survive it. He paused. And she didn't just survive it, she mastered it. Rodriguez spoke up again. Then what happened? Why isn't she flying anymore? Fitzgerald didn't answer immediately. His eyes drifted down to the control panel, searching for something ending to fill the silence. That's when he noticed a small object wedged near the throttle. He reached down and gently picked it up. A pin. Small. Faded. But unmistakable. The Thunderbird embleman eagle with its wings flared in a storm of sky blue. It must have been hers. Tucked away, hidden. Until now. He turned it over in his hand, the worn edges catching the light. I don't know if I could forgive, he said quietly. If I were her, a system that threw her away, a world that dismissed her not for her failure, but for her excellence. Williams stood beside him, voice soft. But she didn't come back for revenge. No, Fitzgerald said, shaking his head. She came back to save us. Not because we deserved it, not because she had something to prove. She came back because it was the right thing to do. Rodriguez looked out again toward the woman they had once ignored. That's not just skill, he murmured. That's character. Fitzgerald nodded slowly. He looked down at the Thunderbird pin in his hand, then slipped it into his pocket with the kind of care you give to relics and regrets. Maybe, he said quietly, I'll return it to her. When I sign up for one of those lessons. A beat passed. The world resumed its ordinary rhythm. Emergency crews began their sweep. Passengers were escorted to waiting vehicles. From the outside, everything looked normal again. But inside that cockpit, something had changed. The men who once believed they'd seen it all had just witnessed something unforgettable, humbling, pure, and human. And as for Sarah, she walked toward the terminal, alone but unburdened. There was no medal awaiting her. No speech. No salutes. But she carried something more valuable than any of those things. The truth of who she really was, finally unshaken by the voices that once tried to define her. She reached the terminal just as the last rays of sun spilled across the tarmac. It lit her path in gold. But she didn't walk like a hero returning home. She walked like someone who had nothing left to prove, not to herself, not to the world. The automatic doors opened in silence, and she stepped through, leaving behind the rumble of emergency vehicles, the roaring wind, the scattered applause, and the fragments of an identity the world had once tried to erase. At the check-in counter, a young airport staffer glanced up, clearly overwhelmed by the chaos unfolding outside. Ma'am, she began, distracted. Are you a passenger from the emergency flight? Sarah nodded. Yes. Ems will be. Can you wait over there? Of course. She waited, calm, still, distant. Her canvas flight bag rested gently against her leg. And inside it, the only things that still remembered the life she'd once lived, a folded Thunderbird's patch, an old set of worn aviator wings, and a photograph of a girl who could once make steel fly like music. She didn't take them out. She didn't need to anymore. Across the tarmac, Fitzgerald descended the stairs slowly. The colonel looked different now, not in his uniform, but in his posture. Like a man who had finally realized that age and rank aren't the same as wisdom, he walked with purpose, clutching something small in his closed fist. He saw her through the terminal window and paused, unsure of what to say. Then, without drama, he entered. She turned at the sound of his footsteps. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then, quietly, he extended his hand. The Thunderbird pin sat there, weathered and scuffed. I believe this belongs to you. Sarah didn't move to take it. I kept it, he said. Not to keep it, but to remind myself. Of what? She asked softly. That sometimes, he said, we don't recognize greatness until it stares us down and takes the yoke. Sarah's eyes didn't leave his. She reached forward, but instead of taking the pin, she gently closed his fingers around it again. Keep it, she said. You might need the reminder again someday. Fitzgerald swallowed hard. I was wrong about you. No, she replied. You were just trained to expect someone else. They stood in silence again, and for the first time since that plane touched down, Neither of them had anything left to say. Only respect remained, and maybe, buried under it, regret. He nodded quietly. I hope our paths cross again. Sarah gave a small smile. They just did. He turned to leave. She watched him go, and when she finally turned away too, she did so with light in her step, not from pride, but from something older, freedom. Not the kind you fight for with weapons, but the kind you reclaim by simply refusing to stay small. Later, she sat in the airport lounge alone, watching planes rise and disappear into the vastness. A child nearby asked her mother, "Do pilots get scared too?" And though the mother didn't answer, Sarah whispered under her breath, "Yes, but they fly anyway." And somewhere back in Colorado, in a quiet garden where sunflowers reached toward heaven, the wind stirred the petals like applause, like memory, like hope. Sarah Bennett had been pushed out of the sky by people too afraid of her brightness. But the sky had waited patiently for her return, and today, when the moment came, she didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She simply rose. She didn't come back for glory. She didn't come back to be seen. She came back because people needed saving, and she knew how. That's not just a pilot. That's what angels look like when they've been grounded too long, wings made of discipline, eyes sharp with purpose, and a heart strong enough to carry 52 souls home through fire and fear. Some women are born to fly, and some never stop.